Welcome, Push. Lovely to have you with us. Push is from India and served for 11 years with the Indian Air Force as a helicopter pilot and saw distinguished service in the India-Pakistani War of 1971, receiving the third highest decoration for valor from the President of India. India's victory allowed the formation of Bangladesh. Push left the Air Force in 1974 and moved to Aberdeen to take up a job as a helicopter pilot with British Airways. In the 80s, he transferred to Chinook helicopters. He has survived with minor injuries from nine aircraft incidents, crashes, and we're glad he's here to tell the tale. And his hobbies are golf, Indian cooking, and he runs a virtual cookery class on Indian cooking, which if anybody's interested in, we can hear about that later. But this evening, Push is going to tell us about surviving a helicopter crash. So without further ado, I'll invite Push now to begin his talk.
Good evening, folks. Thanks very much for inviting me. It's my pleasure to talk about this accident. It's the most amazing story of survival and pure luck, basically. Can you imagine we are on finals, just about to land, 2 miles from the runway at Sumburgh Airport in Shetland Islands. And the helicopter just broke up in midair. We are 200 feet over the North Sea, 47 people on board, and 43 passengers and 2 crew died, and only 2 of us survived, myself and 1 passenger. And it was just amazing. It was just pure luck, nothing else, absolutely nothing else. So I'll tell you how the whole incident happened. In British Airways, we had 6 Chinooks, and every week we used to send 1 Chinook to Sumburgh Airport. And Monday morning, we used to arrive there and stay till Friday and then come back to Aberdeen on Friday evening. So that week on 3rd of November, I took the helicopter. If you can put the picture for me, please, Bob, on the screen.
Can you do that, Mark?
I don't have the picture, Bob. Did you send it to me?
I did. Shall I send it to you again?
I'll have a look.
Sent it by email.
When did you send it?
Yesterday or the day before.
Oh, hang on.
Anyway, I'll keep talking in the meantime. We got ready on the 6th of November. It was a lovely day, beautiful sunshine, and the weather was absolutely brilliant, hardly any wind, which is very rare in Shetland Islands. And we got there about 8 o'clock in the morning to our crew room, started doing our planning. And my co-pilot, his name was Neville Nixon. He had done all the planning and everything. And he had been away from flying for nearly 3 years. He had left flying. He was in Bristol and he had left flying and gone to York to help his wife set up his shop. And the shop was running very well. So he said she can manage herself. And he had just come back to flying about 6 months earlier. And he was very keen to keep flying because he hadn't flown for 3 years. He was actually rostered to fly in the afternoon of the 6th of November. We had 2 sets of crew, 1 morning crew and 1 afternoon crew. The morning crew did 2 trips and the afternoon crew did only 1 trip. So since he was keen to fly extra, he swapped with the morning co-pilot, Mike Stanley. So that sadly for him, that cost him his life. Anyway, but 9 o'clock, the helicopter was ready. We picked up our passengers, and that's the Chinook, actual Chinook, which I was flying on that day. Golf Bravo Whiskey Foxtrot Charlie is the call sign. So we got airborne at 9 o'clock, and just before we took off, our original plan was to land on Brent Charlie and Brent Delta. and we were going to drop 20 passengers of Brent Charlie and 20 passengers of Brent Delta, and that was the job. Just last minute, they gave us Brent Alpha also to drop 10 kilos of freight to drop on Brent Alpha. That added 10 minutes to our flying time. The accident happened just 2 minutes before our flying time. So if the third landing had not been there, we would have been on the ground before the accident happened. Anyway, we got airborne at 9 o'clock, went to Brent Alpha, Charlie, and Brent Delta, did our jobs. And at Brent Delta, we got airborne at 10:22. On the way out, I had been flying, so we share the flying. You know, one side I flew, the other side the co-pilot flew. So on the way out, I was the handling pilot. That means I was the pilot who was flying, and the other guy does all the radios and do all the admin work, like keeping the manifest and making sure the loads are correct and everything. On the way back, my co-pilot was the handling pilot, and I was the non-handling pilot. Now, when you're in the handling pilot, you're holding the controls and maneuvering the controls. So anyway, we climbed up to 2,500 feet and we set course back to Sumburgh. We had full load of passengers, 44 passengers and 3 crew. And we climbed to 2,500 feet. And when we were 40 miles from Sumburgh, we changed over to Sumburgh approach, and they told us to descend down to 1,000 feet, which we did. We started descending down slowly to 1,000 feet. And at 10 miles, we changed over to the control tower. And this is around 11:25, 11:26 about the time. And the Bristow helicopters has a helicopter based at Shetland Islands for air and sea rescue. And they normally go training every morning. And that day they should have gone about 9:30, 10. But because they were waiting for something, so they took off at about 11:29. So I had seen them take off. I'm just giving you this information because it was in my mind. And when my accident happened, I knew he's going to come and pick me up. So now we are 10 miles and we are coming down to 5 miles and we're descending down to 500 feet. And I told my company 2 minutes or 3 minutes to landing. And then we suddenly started hearing this sound, whining sound. It was not sounding dangerous. It didn't feel dangerous, but it was just a whining sound which we had never heard before. And we were discussing where the noise is coming from. In the meantime, our cabin crew had checked, we had put the seatbelt sign on, and he had checked all the passengers had the seatbelt sign and they were ready for landing. He opened the cabin door, came in, and told us thumbs up, passengers ready for landing. And then he heard us talking about this noise which is coming. And he said, oh, the noise is coming from the gearbox above me. This is the gearbox here on just behind the 2 seats, you know, the gearbox, the front gearbox. And our cabin attendant was standing just below it. So he said the noise is coming from here. But even he didn't seem alarmed with the noise. It didn't seem dangerous to him either. So anyway, he gave us thumbs up, and we decided that after we land, we'll tell our engineers to have a look at where the noise is coming from, get rid of the noise before we do our next flight. So the cabin attendant opened the cabin door, closed the cabin door behind him, and I don't think he had time to sit down when there was an almighty bang. Now what happened was the noise that we were hearing was the front gearbox breaking up. And the 2 rotors are overlapping each other and they're counter-rotating. One turns clockwise and the other one turns anti-clockwise. And they're 80% overlapping on each other. And so when the noise was happening, that was the gearbox in the front was breaking up. And once the gearbox broke, the front rotor started slowing down. And then the 2 rotors hit each other. And that is the almighty bang we heard. When the 2 rotors hit each other, the vibration of the rear rotor and the gearbox was so huge that the rear end, if you can look at the picture, that the rotors at the rear end and the red bit where the gearbox is installed, that parted company from the helicopter. Weighing more than 1 ton left the helicopter. Now, if you look at this helicopter now, the front rotor keeps the front end in the air, and the rear end gives lift to the rear end to keep it in the air, so the helicopter stays horizontal. So when the rear rotor disappeared, the helicopter pitched up like this, and the nose went straight into the air. Now, we were doing 100 miles an hour at that time. Our speed was about 100 miles an hour. And suddenly we were doing 0 mile an hour. And we were pointing straight up as if I was climbing straight up. Now, with that whiplash effect, at least half the people died. Because from 100 miles, you suddenly stop to 0 mile. That is a huge whiplash. And my co-pilot died at that time. The reason he died and I didn't die was because he was the handling pilot. So his back was not resting onto the backrest. So when the whiplash happened, his neck broke. My back was resting on the on the backrest. So the whiplash on me was not as bad as was on him. And so now I was looking straight up into the air, and I grabbed hold of the cyclic control and pushed it all the way forward. The front rotor was still responding to the controls, and they tipped over. If you see the windows, where the windows finish, after the windows is the cockpit section. So that section broke off from the main cabin, and the whole front bit flipped over. But we were still attached to the helicopter with the floor, but the cockpit had turned over. So now at one point I could see the sky, and the second point I could see the sea. And I was going vertically towards the sea. And I thought the whole helicopter was behind me. Later on, I found out the helicopter had not turned behind me, just the cockpit had flipped open. And cockpit was still going, the cabin was still going backwards into the water, and the cockpit was going forwards into the water, towards the sea. So as I said, we were about 250 feet, 300 feet from where we started our descent. So we were accelerating, obviously, all the time. When you're coming towards the Earth, the speed is increasing. So when we hit the water, the rear end of the helicopter, nearly 20 feet of it, got completely smashed. That took the entire force of the hitting of the water, and the cockpit just broke off from the main cabin and fell into the water as if from about 15, 20 feet. And then it started descending into the water. You know, we kept going down with the momentum. We just kept going down. And I was in the cockpit, and we went down to maybe 10 meters, 30 feet roughly, before it stopped. In the meantime, the windscreen, both sides of the cockpit, that emergency windows, my emergency window had blown off. And when the cockpit stopped traveling, I decided to leave my seat and come out. And when I left the seat and came out, I started going the wrong way. It was getting darker. Then I turned around, and I knew which side the sunlight was. So I went through the window and started coming up. Later on, I discovered the four seat belts. The pilots wear, the two over the shoulders and two over the thighs, and they're locked in the middle. I had not even unlocked the seat belts. One of the seat belt was broken. Obviously, I can't break it. It is so strong, but that is broken. I don't know how it was broken. I didn't unlock the seat, but somehow I had come out of the four seat belts, and they're quite tight as well. But I don't remember struggling to come out. I just came out quite easily. I came out and I started swimming. And another thing which I discovered later was the front rotor had hit the co-pilot side of the windscreen and smashed it. So all the windscreen, while I was coming down, had been coming into the cockpit and hitting me on left side of the face. So left side of my face was quite cut up. My nose was broken. Fortunately for me, nothing hit my eyes. So when I swam up and reached the surface, it was very pleasant, but of course the water was very, very cold. The other thing which I was not doing, which I had not done, was I was not wearing my life jacket. Life jacket was very uncomfortable when you're flying in the cockpit. So we used to leave it on the side. In case we need it, we'll put it on, of course, but I had no time to put it on. The other thing which I had not done was we wear a survival suit, but survival suit should be fully zipped up to be sealed. But I had left my front part of the survival suit open to be more comfortable, because in the cockpit it becomes very, very hot. So now when I was in the water had gone into my suit, and I was full of water inside, and of course I was in the North Sea as well at that time. So the temperature of the water must have been 7 or 8 degrees Celsius. So it was very, very cold, and I was breathing very hard, and I was feeling very cold. But at the back of my mind, I knew the Bristol helicopter has taken off for training. So I'm sure they'll find us and they'll come and pick us up. So I wasn't sort of worried. And so I was just trying to keep myself afloat. I held on to a wreckage which I found. And when I heard this, then while I was swimming there, one body popped up next to me. Another one popped up. Another one. 7 bodies popped up next to me. And they were not doing anything. Their face was in the water. They were not trying to swim or do anything at all. And that's the first time it occurred to me that somebody had died. I didn't think anybody would die because I was feeling okay. And then I saw a lot of wreckage around me and fuel and hydraulic fuel, and the whole place was a big mess up. And then when I saw the rescue helicopter, I waved at them. And they came over me, and the winchman came down and he put a strap around me, winched me up, put me in the rescue helicopter. The passenger who survived, he was sitting in the front row seats, Eric Morans. He was only 20. That was only his 3rd visit to the Shell platform. And his seat, originally allocated seat, was right at the back. But when he came, he was one of the last passengers to come in. When he came in, all the seats had been occupied and only one seat was left vacant, which was right in the front, facing backwards. He was almost behind me. I was in the cockpit and he was almost behind me. And so he just sat down there. And so when he heard the almighty bang, he just zipped himself up instinctively. And a lot of broken pieces are floating around in the cabin, and something hit him and he passed out. So he was unconscious when the cabin went underwater. The same as my cockpit, the cabin must have also gone about 25, 30 feet. And when it stopped, and because his suit was full of air, it was like a football. So the water threw him out. So when the cockpit had broken off from the main cabin, there's a big hole at the top, where all the windows finish. There was a big hole. That's where the Eric Morans was thrown out. So when he reached the surface, he was still unconscious when he reached the surface, and a wave came and woke him up, went over his face, and he woke him up, and he opened his eyes. And fortunately for him, just at that moment, one dinghy was floating there and it inflated. He grabbed the dinghy, caught hold of the rope, put it around his hand, and passed out again. So when the rescue helicopter came and picked me up, and the noise was there, and all the air was being thrown down by that helicopter, Eric woke up and he waved. So we went and picked him up as well. So the 2 of us were in the rescued helicopter. And then they were looking for 45 more folks. And of course, there were no other movement. Nothing was happening. And then the cabin, the winchman was coming and checking on us every now and then. So I told him by sign language, because there's so much noise there, that my water is still in my suit. If he can cut my socks off, the water can go out. And I think it took him a little while to understand what I was telling him. So eventually he cut my socks off and the water went out. In the meantime, my eyes were closing because I was getting very, very cold. And so was the other gentleman, Eric. His eyes were closing as well. So he went and told the captain, sir, let's take them to the hospital because we're going to lose these 2 gentlemen as well. In the meantime, another helicopter had taken off from Sumburgh to come and search for the rest survivors. And a boat had been launched to do all the recce and pick up any survivors. So we were rushed off to Lerwick Hospital. When we reached Lerwick Hospital, my temperature was about 33, or a little below 33 degrees Celsius. So we were almost, on a hypothermia, and we were very, very fortunate to get to the hospital when we did get to the hospital. So they cut open all our clothes and wrapped us up in a like a tin foil blanket so we can warm ourselves up. And when I came to and when I was able to talk, I asked the doctor, any more folks? And he said, no, just the 2 of you guys. Nobody else made it. Absolutely. And I was just flabbergasted, absolutely flabbergasted. I was amazed. And if you can put the photograph, the second photograph, please, if you can remove this one and put the second photograph.
On.
when the AC aircraft investigation board people came and they were looking at the wreckage and everything, and they're saying they were amazed, when they looked at me, how the hell did you come out of this wreckage? Absolutely amazed, And now, I mean, even me talking to you guys, I still can't believe I was in it, that and not only that, after about, I had very minor injuries, my toes had broken and my nose was broken, but I was okay myself physically, and Eric was okay as well. And by about January time, I was medically fit, but my company won't let me. I wanted to fly again. They were quite happy to give me pension, but I was only 45, and that's the only thing I ever wanted to do in my life was fly. So I was keen to come back to flying again, and so I did my medical and everything was cleared, and but my company kept sending me to some psychiatrists and some psychologists and some mental health people and everything. This is the wreckage which was salvaged from the seabed and brought to the Aberdeen hangar. As you can see, there's hardly anything in it. I was sitting in the front right-hand side seat, if you can see. My seat was the only seat which was still looked like a seat. Almost every other seat had been smashed. As you can see, the seats on the left-hand side, they are all the passenger seats. They were all completely smashed. They had come off the mooring completely. So can you imagine walking out of this helicopter, without hardly any injuries? That's absolutely amazing. That's why the investigation board people are asking me, how did he come out of this one? Absolutely amazing. We can get rid of the photograph now. Thank you. I'm quite happy to answer any questions if you folks have. Yes, sir.
Everybody's muted, folks. Need to unmute if you want to speak.
Thanks. Thanks, Push, for a very informative talk. See, Ronnie's hand is up.
Yeah, Punch, absolutely tremendous talk, and you graphically described everything that went on. Never been a helicopter pilot, was in the army, and I was the air operations officer in South Armagh, flying out of an old mill, Westbrook Mill, and I used to organise 200 sorties per day in and out. Apparently it was the busiest heliport in Europe between the sort of 1970s onwards, almost till the Good Friday Agreement. I saw two crashes. One was a helicopter, a Lynx, got into an inverted vortex.
Wow.
You probably know what that is, I don't. But anyway, it just came down, and there was a full complement of soldiers plus the crew on board, and it broke the helicopter's back. But every one of them got out of that, walked out of that helicopter and went to do the duty. It was pretty amazing. Another one, a guy hit a radio mast, and that had quite serious consequences. They were badly burned, but they survived. And the last one, I was actually invited to go on a Chinook to fly home from Northern Ireland. Fortunately for me, I managed to leave Northern Ireland a couple months earlier, but that was the Chinook.
Oh, that went down
on the Mulligan Tyre, and most of the people on that helicopter, that Chinook, are all good friends of mine. So it was just that I was required early for the next job I was going to do, so I went on the ferry, but I was actually geared up and everything else to go on the Chinook. And of course, when you flew across water, we all had to wear these Mickey Mouse suits, and that's probably what you're talking about, the survival suits. And you didn't want to wear. But I think your story, having a wee bit knowledge, not much, absolutely amazing, very interesting.
I just wanted to add, the Chinook, I've flown so many different helicopters, but 10 helicopters I've flown. But Chinook is probably the best helicopter I've flown in spite of the accident. As you can see, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, they all use them all over the world.
Yeah.
And it's the most powerful helicopter I've flown. We could carry full fuel and full complement of passengers, no bother at all. Most of the helicopters, you're always struggling whether to carry fuel or to carry passengers, depending on the weather.
Yeah.
But in this one, we had so much spare. Yeah, go ahead. And
Oh,
Ron.
I just wanted to ask, what happened to the other survivor? Did he manage to carry on and have a life?
yeah. He kept working. He promised never to fly again, so he never flew. But he was working for an oil company, and he was okay. Yeah, he's fine. He was much younger than me. He was only 20 that time, you know. So I only kept in touch with him for the first year, and after that he went on his own, and I was on my own, so to speak.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Can I ask a couple of questions? One, did it keep you awake at night after the accident? And the second question is that one of the programs that I like to watch is Air Crash Investigation. And
Yeah.
it seems to me that every air crash makes flying safer by the time they analyse the faults and put the corrective action into course. What was the fault with the gearbox? So does it keep you awake at night? And what was the fault with the gearbox?
Well, the keeping awake at night, I didn't really actually keep awake. The only thing which really bothered me for nearly a year was I was alive and 45 people were dead, you know, and I just couldn't get around my head around it, you know, that what did I do? What did they do wrong that they were dead? And I sort of feel guilty about it, that I was alive, you know. And it took me some time to get over that pit, you know. And of course I used to go to the temples, and I used to go to the church, and I used to go to whichever religious institute you can think of, and of course you can't find these answers for these kind of things, you know. And it was just pure luck, nothing else. Just two of us survived, just complete pure luck, nothing else, absolutely nothing else. It was not our time. And not only that, I flew for 20 years after that, you know. And as you mentioned in the introduction, I've had 9 incidents where I walked away. One of them I can tell you is, this is during the war, 1971 war. Of course, the Pakistan army was firing at us like hell. Thousands and thousands of bullets were coming towards us. But this particular day, we were in a small helicopter, gone to see the helipad we were going to operate that night. Just 6 of us in that helicopter, 6-seater, small, tiny helicopter. And on the way back, somebody started firing at us, you know, some soldier. And I thought 5-6 bullets had gone through the helicopter. One of the pilots was injured. The co-pilot took over and quickly came back to base. When we landed and we all came out, we counted, there were 38 bullet holes in that helicopter. 38. It's absolutely amazing that all the bullets missed everybody except one gentleman who got injured. How they missed all of us is absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing, you know. And of course, during the war, so many times they were firing at us all the time. But we were fortunate, we walked away, you know. And yeah, I'm glad I stopped flying and I'm playing golf and much safer there on the ground. Yes, sir.
Oh,
You're muted, Bob.
You can unmute yourself.
Bob, you're muted.
Silly me.
Yeah.
I'm asking, Push, if you can tell us about the Indian cookery course that you do online with people.
Yeah, the cookery. You see what happened in May this year. I've been doing. See, when the accident happened, for 6 months I was sitting on the ground and I didn't know what to do. So I started the cooking Indian curry club called Sahib Curry Club. Aim of teaching folks how to cook Indian food properly, and it just mushroomed. Suddenly, it became so big. I had about 500 members at one time. And they were writing to me and I'm sending them spices and recipes and everything. But that is taking up too much of my time. And of course, I wasn't there to make money out of it. I was just doing it for fun, you know. And so I went to the local school, the gentleman who was looking after the school's catering for the lunches for the children. So I said, you guys make curries and they're rubbish. And can I come and show you guys how to make them properly? So he said, yeah, I'll give you authority. You can go to all the academies. This is in the 90s, you know, 1990 to 1992 for 2 years or 3 years roughly. I went right from Stonehaven up to Nairn, all the academies in between. Nearly must be about 60 academies. Every week I used to pick a day when I was off and I used to arrange and do lunch for them. And I used to give them recipes and spices and everything. And that carried on for nearly 3 years. And suddenly I got a call from Gordonston School and said, you do lunches for schools, come and do lunch for us. So I asked them, how many lunches do you make? And she said, 750. 750. Bloody hell. I just fell off the chair, you know. I was cooking for about 100 people at that time. So I said, no problem. I'll sort it out. We'll do 750 lunches. So I organized the recipes, organized the spices and everything. And she said, come at 6 in the morning. We'll serve the lunch at 1. I said, no, I'm not doing that. I'll come one day early. Then there's no panic. So I went there one day early. And of course, they have lovely chefs there, and the equipment they got is out of the world. You know, absolutely wonderful equipment. So I just gave every chef one recipe, and of course, they were proper chefs. I'm not a chef. I'm just an amateur, just enjoying myself. And they were cooking far better food than I was cooking. You know, just with the same recipe. I was just keeping an eye on them, and they produced wonderful food, absolutely wonderful. 750 people. I had 25 dishes in my recipe book. So we made all 25 dishes. Can you imagine the choice the kids had? And of course, you could see the food. They had a conveyor belt where you put the empty plates back when they go for cleaning. So any food which kids, and of course, kids are not going to mess around. If they don't like the food, they're going to put it back. And not a single plate had any food on it. So it went down like a treat. So after that, nearly 5-6 years, she was taking recipes from me and spices from me and everything. So anyway, that's, by the way, in May this year, I do cooking classes, 3 or 4 cooking classes in Inverurie. There's a Gary kitchen. I go and do it there. But when the lockdown came, that all stopped. So somebody said, why don't we start virtual cooking? So in May, we launched it. And first class, I had about 4 or 5 people. And then suddenly everybody realized this is a good deal. And I was, of course, not charging anybody anything. I just told the folks, just make a contribution to so-and-so charity. And that's what they were doing. And so from there, I'm doing 2 classes. I plan 2 classes every month. And if anybody asks me, can you do a class on so-and-so date? I'm quite happy to do it. All you have to do is get your 4 to 8 people who are willing to do the class. I'll send you all the recipes. You buy all the ingredients, and I'll be guiding you how to make those dishes, you know. And you're cooking the food in your own home. And at the end of the class, of course, you have a lovely meal ready to eat in your own house, you know. So you can't get a better deal than that. And as I said, I don't charge anything. It's my pleasure. I just enjoy doing it. And you have a meal at the end of it. And anybody who's not even done any Indian cooking is more than welcome to try it out, because the recipes are so easy. And so many people, nearly 500-600 people have tried these recipes. So all the mistakes have been taken out, you know. And even in the virtual class, there are 100. I've had 100 people so far booked up from May onwards, you know. And about 60 of them have already done the classes, and I got 40 more during this month and next month. So if you guys want to do a class yourself, you're more than welcome. Just gather a few people around, and I'll send you the recipes. You pick 3 that you would like to cook, and we meet up on Zoom again like we're doing today, and I'll guide you guys through making those dishes. And as I said, they're very easy.
How long does a class last?
2 hours, 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Idea is that 6 o'clock you can have your meal.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds like a plan for us, folks. Yeah, Jim.
Just wondering, how do we contact you if we want to organise a class?
You have my email. You just send me an email. Yeah,
It's fine. Okay, we can sort that out. That's a really interesting talk, Push. I'm sure I have photographed you in the past when I was with Press and Journal, many moons ago. So your name was certainly known to me. A really informative talk. Does anyone else have any questions of Push? Okay, I'm going to ask Bob to give the vote of thanks. Bob.
Well, thanks very much, Push. I was telling Push when we were exchanging emails that I had done an exchange tour with the Royal Air Force, and I had 3 ambitions, I used to tell them. One was to meet a squadron leader with a handlebar moustache called Algie, although that never happened. Second ambition was to eat as many cream teas and RAF officers' messes as I could, which was very enjoyable. And thirdly was, of course, to fly in as many aircraft as I could. But I only managed 2 helicopters, which ironically were both Navy, the Wessex and the Lynx. I served at RAF Newton, which was near Nottingham. And HMS Nottingham were given the freedom of the city, and their helicopter pilot came to RAF Newton, where I was serving, to give air cadets and sea cadets a little trip in the helicopter, and did aerobatics, and everybody, including me, went green. And of course, he got his comeuppance later because of it all. He was late for the fly past over Nottingham. Anyway, thank you, Push, for such a lucid explanation and description of your accident. And mercifully, everything held together so that you and Eric were saved by the rescue aircraft. And it was fascinating to hear of your survival in several occasions, and also to hear about your Indian cookery. Never knew that they had 750 lunches to serve at Gordonston.
Actually, that day all the staff also came, and the families also came.
Well, I don't blame them. Nothing like school dinners to make you feel warm in the cockles, as it were. So a big thank you. It's been a lovely evening. Thank you for joining us, and I wish you well with the cooking. If I have the email address, if anybody would like to sign up for Push's class, let me know and I'll organise that. Thank you again very much.
Thank you, sir. Thanks very much. Thank you. So I'll say goodbye to you guys. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye.